Raymond Halpern bent over the old corn cleaner, his back protesting the way it always did after too many years of hard work. The wrench slipped and smacked his knuckles, ringing off the concrete like a dinner bell. He muttered under his breath, wiping grease onto a rag that had lived in his pocket longer than some local politicians had lasted in office. Out here, 3 miles past town, the sound of tires on gravel was as startling as thunder out of a clear sky. He froze, counted the seconds, and glanced through the dusty garage window. A red sedan eased from behind the line of oaks, nosing toward the porch. Dust hung in the air like judgment, and the heat shimmered above the hood. Raymond set down the wrench and stepped outside, boots crunching on gravel. Trouble, he knew, had finally found its way back. From the driver's side stepped a woman he had not seen in 8 years but would recognize in the dark. Leaner now, sharper, her expensive blazer tailored to impress someone else, not him. Her eyes carried shadows, her hands twisted a key against her palm like it was a worry stone. Raymond's jaw tightened. He had not heard her voice in nearly a decade, but her silhouette carried every memory he had tried to bury. Cassandra Morse, his late son's widow, the same woman who had left 2 small boys asleep in his living room one ordinary afternoon and driven away under a sky that deserved better. Raymond shifted the wrench in his hand, not as a threat but as punctuation. He moved between her and the front door. That, he believed, was his place in this world, standing between trouble and the family he loved. "Cassandra," Raymond said, his tone carrying the weight of too many winters. She pasted on a smile that faltered before it reached her tired eyes. "Raymond, you look well." The old man's face did not change. His voice came out steady. "What do you want?" She lifted her chin, rehearsed, certain. "My children." 2 words spoken with such force that they seemed carved in stone. His grip on the wrench tightened until his knuckles whitened. For 8 years Ethan and Caleb had grown up under his roof. School mornings, ball games, colds, laughter, scraped knees. They were his boys now, not by theft but by love. "You lost the right to call them yours," he said evenly, "the day you put the accelerator where your backbone should have been." She flinched, only slightly, then smoothed her expression as though she had practiced this very moment in the mirror 100 times. "I was sick, Raymond," Cassandra replied softly, with an edge that begged for sympathy. "Grief is an illness. I needed time." Her words spread across the gravel like oil, shiny, slick, untrustworthy. The breeze shifted through the corn, and somewhere far off, a crow argued with a fence post. Her gaze flicked toward the windows of the farmhouse, as if the boys might be pressed there, watching her. "I'm better now," she continued, her voice firmer. "And I want my sons back." "You need to leave my property," Raymond said. The words were steady but laced with steel. Cassandra's smile returned, colder this time. "We'll see," she murmured. Turning, she walked back to the car as though the earth itself belonged to her, each step a statement of defiance. She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and left him standing in the dust. The tail lights blinked twice through the trees before vanishing behind the oaks. Raymond exhaled the kind of long breath a man takes when he isn't sure whether to pray or curse. He did both quietly. Inside, the farmhouse caught him like it always did when the world pressed too hard. He filled the kettle, measured scoops of ground coffee, and let the bitter scent steady his nerves. On the refrigerator hung an old photograph of his son, Matthew. Uniform sharp, smile bright, 22 and invincible. Pictures lie, Raymond thought. Matthew had not lived to grow gray. Cancer didn't bargain, didn't wait. By the end of that cruel winter, Raymond had been a widower raising 2 boys whose mother had vanished into silence. He remembered Cassandra once sitting in Matthew's old chair, grief like a stone she refused to put down. He remembered the nights she stumbled back to the porch smelling of cheap wine, trying to climb the stairs to wake the boys. And he remembered Ethan and little Caleb crouched together on the staircase, clutching each other as if the world had slipped from under their feet. That was the last time he ever let her through the door. The kettle whistled, snapping him back. He poured coffee that burned his tongue but steadied his hands. The late sun cut through gingham curtains, casting golden rectangles across the worn kitchen table. The bus groaned to a stop at the bend in the road, doors hissing open. Footsteps pounded the porch, and the front door flew wide. "Hey, Grandpa!" Ethan called, taller each week, baseball cap twisted in his hand, eyes the mirror of Matthew's. Caleb followed close, paint smudged on his fingers again. His art teacher's influence clinging like dust. "Wash up." "Apples on the counter," Raymond said, falling into the routine that kept life steady. Ethan raided the fridge, pouring milk like he owned the dairy. "Coach says I might make varsity next year if I keep working on my curve," he said, chest swelling. Raymond smiled. "That's so." Caleb spread a watercolor across the table. Their farmhouse, with a sky so blue it almost hurt, and 3 stick figures in the yard. He had labeled them carefully. Raymond, Ethan, Caleb. No room left for anyone else. Raymond's throat tightened, but he swallowed the ache. They worked on homework, argued kindly about screen time, ate meatloaf because some foods remind bones they are safe. Yet beneath the normal rhythm, Raymond's mind circled the same sharp memory. The red sedan, the cold smile, and the words, "my children." Later, when dishes were washed and teeth brushed, Raymond sat in the kitchen as silence wrapped the farmhouse. The porch light burned steady, making an island of safety on the stoop. Then the phone rang. He lifted the receiver, knowing before she spoke who it was. "Did you get the papers?" Cassandra's voice was cool, rehearsed. "What papers?" Raymond asked, though dread already curled in his gut. "You'll see," she replied. The line went dead. He sat at the table, staring at the quiet kitchen. Trouble had come not just in words but in ink. And ink, he knew, had sharp edges of its own. The next morning, the postman didn't leave the packet in the box. That was how Raymond knew it was important. Trouble never fit in an envelope small enough for a mailbox. He signed for the certified letter, his hand shaky, the ink on his name trailing like a tractor across wet soil. Back inside, he sat at the kitchen table and opened it. The words spilled out like poison. Unlawful detention, custodial interference, best interests of the child. Language meant to strip love down into paragraphs of accusation. Raymond read it once standing, again sitting, and a third time with both fists pressed against the table so they wouldn't shake. Each word turned the air colder. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Right on schedule, as if she had timed the call with the delivery. "Meet me at 3, Cassandra said. "Pine Street Diner. We can settle this quietly, or the court will." Her voice carried the smugness of someone who had rehearsed victory in front of a mirror. Raymond listened, then hung up without answering. He knew where he'd be at 3, though not for her reasons. He set the packet down and tucked an old envelope into his jacket pocket. It was worn soft from years of folding and unfolding, the ink faded but still legible. He didn't know why he'd kept it all these years, only that sometimes the heaviest truths waited for the right day to be carried. At the Pine Street Diner, the air smelled of bacon grease and coffee that had been burning since dawn. The bell over the door jingled as Raymond walked in. Betty Hale, who'd been topping off mugs for 30 years, looked up at him with kind eyes. "You look like a man who needs pie," she said. Raymond smiled faintly. "Maybe later." He chose a booth near the window where he could see his truck, where no one could come up behind him. At exactly 3 o'clock, Cassandra slid into the seat across from him. Black suit, manicured nails, hair angled just so, an image carefully constructed. She glanced at his hands, then at his face. "You look tired," she said flatly. $500,000, Cassandra said, not bothering with small talk. "Wire it to me, and I disappear permanently. Or I take them. You're old, Raymond. Isolated. The courts love a rehabilitated mother. Think about it." She smiled, barely showing her teeth, like a predator disguising hunger. The number hung in the air, out of place among the smell of fries and the sound of silverware clinking against plates. Raymond sipped his coffee, bitter and familiar. "Where were you when Ethan broke his leg sliding into home?" he asked. "Where were you when Caleb coughed so hard they kept him overnight and I sat there counting machine beeps so I wouldn't count my failures?" Her eyes didn't waver. "I was sick," she said, her tone smooth, detached. "I'm better now." "You have 48 hours to decide," Cassandra added, sliding a $20 bill beside the sugar caddy so the world could see she paid her way. Then she stood, heels clicking on the linoleum like a metronome marking bad choices. Raymond didn't move until she was gone. Only then did Betty approach, her hand hovering near his shoulder. "You want that pie now?" she asked softly. He let out a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. "I want my boys," he said. "But pie wouldn't hurt." Betty nodded and returned with a slice of apple, steam rising from its golden crust. On the drive home, the cornfields unspooled under a sky that had the decency to stay clear. The steering wheel felt solid under his grip, like a handhold on a train that wasn't about to stop. By the time the farmhouse came into view, Raymond had a plan. It wasn't grand. It wasn't clever. But it was the kind of plan that had kept him alive through floods and lean harvests and long winters. Survive today, prepare for tomorrow. Tonight he would tell the boys. Tomorrow he would find help. After dinner, when homework was scattered across the coffee table and the kitchen smelled faintly of dish soap, Raymond switched off the television. Ethan and Caleb looked up, puzzled. He sat across from them, steadying his voice. "Fellas, your mother came by," he said. The words dropped into the room like stones. Ethan froze, shoulders tightening. Caleb's mouth opened, then closed again, as if he had carried a question for 8 years and only now found the courage to ask it. "She wants to talk to you," Raymond continued. "And more than that, she's filed papers. Says I kept you from her. Says you belong with her now." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. The clock ticked too loudly. The house creaked as if listening. "She can't just," Ethan started, anger sharpening his voice. "She left," he added, his fists curling on his knees. Raymond nodded. "She was hurting," he said quietly. "Both things can be true. But this is our life now. What you want matters." Caleb looked at his socks, then at the space between his shoes, where the truth often hid. "Can we meet her?" he asked carefully. "But still stay here?" His voice was small, hopeful. "We might have to see her," Raymond said honestly. "But where you live, that's what I'll fight for." Ethan's jaw set firm. "I'm not going anywhere, Grandpa. This is home." Caleb, always following his brother's lead, nodded hard. "Me neither. I want to stay." Relief washed through Raymond so deep it seemed to loosen even the ache in his elbows. He stood, motioning toward the kitchen table. "Come on, let's have cocoa. Decisions get made there." Ethan and Caleb grinned faintly. The heaviness lifted, just enough to let the warmth of routine back in. At the table, mugs steaming, they talked about lawyers and judges in simple words. About how routine, school, health, and truth mattered in court. They talked about people who could be sick in ways soup and blankets couldn't cure. They talked about telling the truth without cruelty. When the boys finally climbed the stairs, their footsteps sounded like blessings on the old floorboards. Raymond stayed at the table, pulling the worn envelope from his jacket. The letter inside, penned in Cassandra's own hand, confessed her abandonment. He folded it carefully, slid it back inside, and rested it against his chest. The night pressed quiet against the farmhouse walls. Tomorrow he would start gathering his defense. Tonight, he let himself believe in one thing. The boys had chosen home. The night stretched long, but Raymond didn't waste it on sleep. He walked the fence line with a flashlight, the beam bobbing over posts and wire, a habit he had kept since the first winter after Matthew died. Coyotes yipped in the distance, owls answered from the trees, and the house behind him glowed softly, a lamp in each boy's room. That glow was the only promise he needed. Back on the porch, he sat with the envelope in his lap, the porch swing creaking under his weight. He let the night air carry his thoughts. Cassandra had given him 48 hours. $500,000 or his grandson's. He didn't have money, but he had truth, community, and the stubbornness God gave old men to make up for what time had taken from their knees. At dawn, he packed lunches. 2 turkey sandwiches, one with mustard drawn like a lightning bolt because Caleb swore it made him faster. He kissed the tops of their heads, ignoring their embarrassed protests, and sent them off to the bus. Then he picked up the phone and called the school secretary. "Dana Whitaker," she said when he asked for a family lawyer. Not flashy, but effective. Raymond shaved, pulled on the jacket with soft elbows, what his late wife used to call his church armor, and drove into town. The fields rolled by unchanged, but he felt the weight of time pressing him forward. Whitaker's office sat above the hardware store, 2 flights of narrow stairs that held the smell of sawdust and secrets. The frosted glass door was plain. D. Whitaker, attorney. Inside, a plant leaned toward the window, and the bookshelves actually looked red. Dana herself stood when he entered. Late 30s, hair blunt and practical, eyes that didn't blink for effect. Her handshake was firm, no velvet, no nails. "Mr. Halpern," she said. "Call me Raymond," he replied. She nodded once, then gestured for him to sit. She didn't clutter the air with sympathy. She asked for facts and he gave them. For an hour, Raymond poured out 8 years of mornings and midnights. School drop-offs, doctor visits, birthdays, and scraped knees. He spoke of Cassandra's sudden departure, the red sedan's return, the diner meeting, the cash ultimatum. Dana's face barely shifted, but when he slid the old envelope across the desk, she paused. Pulling on gloves, she opened it carefully. Cassandra's handwriting stared back. A confession of abandonment, a surrender of motherhood. "Do you have the original?" Dana asked. "That's it," Raymond said. "We'll make 2 certified copies and lock this one up." Her pen clicked once, a sound sharp as a gavel. Dana leaned forward. "We'll bring in a handwriting expert to confirm. And we'll need to know where she's been these 8 years. Rehab. New life. New name. I know someone who can find out." Raymond thought of an old friend. "Ray Delgado still works private," he said. "If he's answering his phone, he'll know how to dig." Dana nodded. "Good. Opposing counsel is Whitcomb and Crane LLP. Big city firm. Lots of noise, not much substance." She tapped the file. "They've filed for emergency temporary custody. Hearing is set for a week from Tuesday. That clock is not our friend." Raymond's voice stayed calm, though his chest felt heavy. "She gave me 48 hours to pay her or lose the boys." Dana's eyes sharpened. "Don't pay her. If you do, it looks like you believe she has the right to sell them. We'll counter with supervised visitation. Short, neutral setting with me present. That shows good faith. Meanwhile, we stack what a judge respects. Stability, continuity, witnesses, school and medical records. And this note, authenticated." Raymond nodded slowly. "Can a judge talk to the boys?" Dana hesitated. "Sometimes. But I'd rather their steadiness show in paper, not under pressure." She slid a checklist across the desk. It looked like it could swallow a weekend whole. Affidavits. Alma Green, the neighbor. Betty Hale, the diner waitress. Parker Nash, the school principal. Dr. Priya Singh, the pediatrician. If there had been any police calls, Officer Ben Carter could testify. "We've kept the bad out of the boys' hearing," Raymond said firmly. Dana met his eyes. "And we'll keep doing that. But family court isn't about punishing her for leaving. It's about proving you provide a safe, steady home now." Raymond breathed deep. "That I can do." The retainer number was high, but not as obscene as Cassandra's demand. Raymond told her what he could access without selling the pasture. Dana looked past the dollars to the man across from her. "I'll phase the billing," she said. "Put most hours on hold until after the hearing. I want this on the merits." Raymond studied her for a long moment. "You like winning." Dana's lips curved faintly. "I like keeping children safe. You strike me as a man who's done that without a court for a long time." He nodded once, gratitude quiet but solid. Dana made certified copies of the letter while Raymond watched. She sealed the original in a red-topped evidence envelope and slid a paper across for his signature. If she contacts you again, direct her to me. No more meetings alone. And tell your boys the truth they can carry. No more, no less. Raymond signed, the pen scratching steady. He left her office with a folder heavy enough to remind him of the fight ahead. On the sidewalk, town looked the same as it always had. Old storefronts pretending to be new, but he felt the weight of war. Leaning against his truck, Raymond dialed a number he hadn't touched in years. It rang long, the way it does when a man changes everything except his phone. Finally, a gravelly voice answered. Delgado. Raymond smiled faintly. Ray, it's Raymond Halpern. A pause, then warmth softened the line. Thought you'd call me to invite me to a quiet retirement. Tell me I'm wrong. Raymond chuckled once. You're wrong. He told him everything, slow and steady. Ray didn't interrupt. When the story ended, he exhaled like a taut wire loosening. I'll start with county and state records, he said. Then ask the people who only talk after midnight. Send me the scope in writing from your lawyer. And Raymond, watch your six. People who think they're owed something get creative. Raymond slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket and looked down Main Street. The same barber pole spun lazily in front of Johnson's shop. The same teenagers leaned against the soda machine outside the corner store. But everything felt sharper, as if the town itself understood he was heading into a fight. He climbed into his old truck and drove home slow, thinking of the checklist Dana had given him. Witnesses, documents, truth stacked like cordwood against the frost. He thought of the envelope in her evidence bag. Cassandra's own words might yet save him, but he couldn't lean only on paper. He needed voices, people who had seen the boys laugh, grow, stumble, and rise again under his roof. That evening, Alma Green came by with a plate of cornbread. Her apron dusted with flour as always. She lived 3 houses down, a widow herself, and had been more family than neighbor for years. Heard about Cassandra showing her face again, she said bluntly, setting the cornbread on the counter. Raymond sighed. Word travels faster than tires on gravel. Alma crossed her arms. If the court wants to know who raised those boys, they can ask me. I've seen Ethan mow your lawn, Caleb paint half my fence, and both of them haul groceries without being told. They're yours in all but name. Raymond's throat tightened. I may need you to say that under oath. Alma nodded without hesitation. Then I will. The next stop was the Pine Street diner. Betty was already pouring coffee when he walked in. Dana might call you, he said as he slid into a booth. She'll need you to testify about what Cassandra said. Betty frowned. About the money. Raymond nodded. $500,000 or the boys. Word for word. Betty set down the pot, her jaw tight. I'll swear it on a Bible or on the good name of this diner. Folks around here know who's been raising those kids. It wasn't her. Raymond felt something steady in his chest. Each voice he gathered was a brick in a wall Cassandra couldn't climb. At the school, Principal Parker Nash listened carefully as Raymond explained. A broad-shouldered man with a gentle voice, Parker had watched Ethan and Caleb grow year after year. They're good boys, he said firmly. On time, respectful, hard-working. Ethan's shaping into a leader on the team, and Caleb. He's got a gift with art. I'll sign whatever affidavit you need. Raymond exhaled, relief washing through him. Thank you, Parker. The principal leaned across his desk. Raymond, judges look at more than grades. They look at roots. Those boys are planted here. Deep. The next morning, Dr. Priya Singh met him in her office, the scent of antiseptic sharp in the air. She flipped through the boys' medical files. Broken bones, vaccinations, flu shots, late-night calls when Caleb's cough turned bad. You've been here for all of it, she said softly. And she hasn't. Raymond nodded, jaw tight. Will you testify? Dr. Singh closed the file gently. For Ethan and Caleb, yes. Court needs to see more than love. They need to see health care continuity. You've given them that. For the first time in days, Raymond felt the balance tipping slightly in his favor. That night, the boys sprawled on the living room floor, Ethan sketching out baseball plays, Caleb smearing colors across a new canvas. Raymond watched them quietly from his chair, the lamplight warming the room. He wanted to tell them about the witnesses, the affidavits, the evidence building like a fortress around them, but Dana's advice echoed in his mind. Only the truth they could carry. How was practice? He asked instead. Ethan grinned. Coach says my curveball's nasty now. Caleb held up his painting. 3 figures under a wide blue sky, that's us, he said simply. Raymond's heart swelled. That was all the testimony he needed. Meanwhile, Ray Delgado worked in the shadows. He called late that night, voice low. Found her trail. Rehab clinic in county. In and out for 2 years. Then she surfaced under a different name, Carla James. Lived with a man named Robert Miles. Neighbors reported fights, shouting, police calls. Nothing stuck, but it's all on record. Raymond pinched the bridge of his nose. She'll paint herself as reborn, he muttered. Ray chuckled grimly. Judges love redemption stories, but they hate patterns. And her pattern's ugly. I'll keep digging. The following Sunday, the church pew felt harder than usual under Raymond's back. The sermon was about truth, about carrying burdens not meant to be carried alone. As the congregation sang, he bowed his head, whispering a prayer not for victory but for strength. Afterward, Pastor John clasped his hand. Heard whispers, Raymond. You're fighting a battle. Raymond nodded. One I can't afford to lose. The pastor's eyes were steady. Then know this, you don't stand alone. We'll speak if needed. For a moment, Raymond felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. On Monday, Dana called him into her office again. She spread out a timeline on her desk, each year marked with records. School photos, report cards, medical files, holiday cards from neighbors. This, she said, tapping the stack, is a life. Judges don't just read words, they feel stories. We'll show them Ethan and Caleb's story with you. Raymond listened, nodding slowly. And Cassandra. Dana's mouth tightened. We'll cross-examine. The letter is our strongest weapon. Her words, her handwriting. She abandoned them. No court can ignore that. Raymond leaned back, weary but resolute. Then we fight. That evening, as the sun bled gold across the fields, Raymond sat with Ethan and Caleb on the porch swing. The creak of chains, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the warmth of 2 boys pressed close. Grandpa, Ethan asked suddenly, are we gonna have to go to court? Raymond hesitated, then nodded. Maybe. But remember this, it's not about who left. It's about who stayed. And I stayed. Caleb leaned his head on Raymond's shoulder. We know. The porch light flickered on, chasing away the dark. For the first time since the red sedan had appeared, Raymond let himself believe they could win. The week moved like mud and fire at the same time. Slow in minutes, fast in consequence. Each morning, Raymond packed lunches, checked homework, and watched the boys board the bus as if the sight itself was proof of belonging. Each evening, he added to Dana's stack. Photographs, school awards, report cards, receipts for doctor's visits. Every scrap of paper felt like a stone in the foundation of his defense. At night, when the house grew quiet, he unfolded Cassandra's letter again, tracing the faded ink with his finger. It was her confession, her surrender. Take them, raise them, love them, she had written. The words had nearly destroyed him years ago. Now they might save everything. 2 days before the hearing, Ray Delgado called again. Tracked down Robert Miles, he said. Not the kind of man a judge admires. 3 arrests for domestic disputes. 1 for drunk driving. He'll testify if subpoenaed. Claims she left him after draining his bank account. Raymond closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. That'll help. Ray chuckled darkly. It won't paint her as stable, that's for sure. And judges like stability. Trust me, this is dynamite if Dana handles it right. Raymond thanked him, his voice rough with gratitude. Old friends, he thought, were God's way of reminding a man he wasn't fighting alone. The night before the hearing, Raymond sat Ethan and Caleb at the kitchen table. The cocoa steamed, their faces lit by the old hanging lamp. "Tomorrow's important," he said gently. "You might hear things that sound sharp, maybe even cruel. But remember, truth isn't always soft, and it isn't always easy. What matters is that you know you're loved, and that this is home." Ethan straightened, his jaw firm. "We know, Grandpa." Caleb nodded quickly, eyes wide. "Are they gonna ask us questions?" Raymond shook his head. "Not if I can help it. Our story's already written, and it's right here." He tapped the table. That night, sleep came in scraps. Raymond dreamed of Matthew, strong and smiling, then fading into shadows. He dreamed of Cassandra's silhouette walking away under a pitiless sky. When dawn broke, he dressed carefully. Pressed shirt, clean boots, jacket with the worn elbows. The boys wore their Sunday clothes, Ethan tugging at his collar, Caleb clutching a sketchbook. "For luck," Caleb explained. Raymond smiled. "Then bring it." Together they climbed into the truck, the road to town unrolling before them like a gauntlet. The courthouse loomed ahead, stone and steel against the morning light. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polish and paper. Cassandra sat with her lawyers at one table, black suit sharp, hair gleaming. She looked like she had practiced her expression in the mirror, remorseful but determined. Her attorneys whispered around her, thick folders stacked high. Dana guided Raymond to the opposite table, calm as stone. "Remember," she murmured, "we don't prove her past. We prove your present." Raymond nodded, his hands folded tight on the table. Across the aisle, Cassandra's gaze flicked to Ethan and Caleb, then quickly away. The judge, gray-haired and steady-eyed, entered and called the session to order. Cassandra's lawyers spoke first, their words slick and polished. They painted her as a grieving mother who had lost her way but found redemption. They spoke of illness, of recovery, of a renewed life ready to embrace responsibility. Cassandra lowered her eyes, dabbing at them with a tissue. To an untrained ear, it might have sounded convincing. But Raymond watched her carefully. He saw the corners of her mouth twitch, the rehearsed timing of her gestures. She wasn't speaking truth, she was performing it. Then it was Dana's turn. She rose with calm authority, her voice measured but firm. She presented photographs of the boys through the years, their school awards, their medical records. She called Alma Green, who spoke of everyday kindnesses, the boys mowing lawns, painting fences, living like sons in Raymond's care. She called Betty Hale, who testified about the diner meeting and the ultimatum. $500,000 or she takes them, Betty said, her voice sharp with indignation. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Cassandra shifted uncomfortably, her eyes narrowing. Next came Principal Nash, his testimony steady as a teacher's chalk line. He spoke of Ethan's leadership, Caleb's gift with art, the stability of their lives in Raymond's home. Dr. Singh followed, outlining the medical history, Raymond's constant presence, Cassandra's absence. Each witness stacked another brick in the wall Dana was building. Then she called Officer Ben Carter, who confirmed past welfare checks tied to Cassandra's name, reports of disturbances at Robert Miles's home. Cassandra's attorneys objected, but the judge allowed it. The weight of evidence pressed heavier with each word finally. Dana reached into her folder and produced the envelope. She held it up carefully. "This," she said, "is written in Ms. Morse's own hand." She read aloud, "Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't. They're yours now." The courtroom went silent, the words echoing like thunder. The judge leaned forward. "Do the boys know about this letter?" he asked, his voice grave. Raymond stood slowly. "Not yet, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady. The judge nodded, eyes lingering on him. "They should." Cassandra's mask cracked then, her face tightening, her lips trembling. Her attorneys scrambled, objecting, demanding handwriting analysis, questioning authenticity. Dana calmly produced certified copies, expert reports, witnesses who had seen Cassandra's handwriting. The judge accepted the evidence. Cassandra sat frozen, her eyes darting between Raymond, the boys, and the letter that betrayed her. For the first time her confidence faltered. Raymond glanced at Ethan and Caleb, both sitting tall, their eyes bright with trust. He breathed deeply, the weight in his chest lifting. The truth, at last, had a voice louder than lies. The courtroom felt heavier after the letter was read, as though the air itself had absorbed the weight of Cassandra's confession. Dana remained composed, her notes lined neatly before her. Cassandra's attorneys scrambled, trying to claw back ground that had already slipped away. They asked for recesses, filed objections, but the judge's gavel cut them short each time. When Cassandra was finally called to the stand, she straightened her blazer, forcing calm into her voice. "I was sick," she repeated. "I needed time." Her words wavered, her eyes darting toward the boys. "I am better now. I can give them what they deserve." But the cracks showed. She was no longer the woman rehearsed in mirrors, she was cornered. Dana rose slowly for the cross-examination, her voice steady as steel. "Ms. Morse, do you recognize this letter?" Cassandra hesitated, her throat tightening. "It's my handwriting," she admitted at last. "But I wasn't myself. I was grieving." Dana pressed gently but firmly. "Yet you wrote it. You entrusted their care to Mr. Halpern. And for 8 years you never returned. No calls, no birthdays, no school meetings. Nothing." Cassandra faltered, her practiced poise slipping. I thought they were better off without me." Dana stepped back. "They were," she said quietly, and the silence that followed felt like a verdict all its own. Raymond kept his eyes on the judge, not Cassandra. He had promised himself he would not let anger undo him. He focused on the truth. Ethan's baseball games, Caleb's paintings, the small rituals of love built year after year. That was what mattered, not Cassandra's excuses. When Dana sat down, the judge leaned back, thoughtful. "The court has heard enough for today. I'll review the evidence carefully. Temporary custody remains with Mr. Halpern until a final decision is made." The gavel struck once, the sound reverberating like thunder. Raymond exhaled, shoulders slumping. It was not the end, but it was enough for now. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded with people. Neighbors, church members, even strangers who had heard whispers of the case. Alma Green pressed his arm. "You stood tall in there," she said proudly. Betty hugged him tight, whispering, "500,000 can't buy what you've given them." Ethan and Caleb stood close, their faces bright with relief. "We're still with you, Grandpa," Ethan said firmly. Caleb nodded, clutching his sketchbook. "Always." Raymond swallowed the lump in his throat. "That's all I need, boys. That's all I need." That evening, the farmhouse felt lighter, as though the walls themselves knew the storm had broken. Ethan tossed his cap on the table, grinning. "Coach says I'm pitching Friday. You'll be there, right?" Raymond chuckled. "Wouldn't miss it." Caleb spread out his paints, the first stroke bright and bold. "I'm making something for you, Grandpa," he said softly. Raymond ruffled his hair. "Just don't paint me too handsome. Folks might not recognize me." The boys laughed, the sound rich and healing. For the first time in weeks, supper tasted like peace. Later, Raymond stepped onto the porch, the swing creaking under him. The envelope sat heavy in his pocket, but now it felt less like a burden and more like armor. He looked up at the stars nailed bright against the night sky. "Matthew," he whispered, speaking to the son whose face lived in photographs. "I kept my promise. I did right by them." The night air was cool, the fields whispering their approval. For the first time in years, Raymond allowed himself a full smile. The following morning Dana called. "The judge won't rush this," she said. "But the evidence is strong. Cassandra's credibility is damaged. The letter is irrefutable. We'll push for permanent guardianship." Raymond thanked her, his voice thick. "I owe you more than I can pay." Dana replied firmly. You don't owe me, Mr. Halpern. You owe your boys what you've already given them, a home. When he hung up, Ethan and Caleb were at the table, arguing good-naturedly over chores. Normal life, louder and sweeter than any victory speech. That week, the farm buzzed with its ordinary rhythm. Ethan practiced pitches against the barn wall, the thud echoing across the yard. Caleb painted the fields, his fingers stained with color. Raymond worked the fences, his back aching but steady. Life continued, stitched together by small moments that courts could never fully measure. Each night, they gathered around the kitchen table, homework and laughter spilling into the air. Cassandra's shadow still lingered, but it no longer darkened the whole house. The truth had cracked it wide open. Friday night, the ball field lights glared against the dark sky. Raymond sat in the bleachers, clapping as Ethan pitched his first strike. Caleb sketched the scene on paper, his strokes quick and sure. Around them, neighbors cheered, voices rising in unity. Raymond looked at his grandsons, pride swelling. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Cassandra might still fight, courts might still drag, but nothing could erase the life they had built here, inning by inning, brushstroke by brushstroke. Back at the farmhouse, the porch light burned steady, its glow a beacon against the night. Raymond stood between the boys' doors, listening to the rhythm of their sleep, just as he had when they were small. He was an old man with a bad back, but he was rich in all the ways that counted. He had love, truth, and 2 boys who had chosen home. In the end, that was stronger than any courtroom, any demand, any threat. He whispered one last promise into the quiet hall. You'll never face the cold. Not while I'm here. And with that, he turned out the lamp, leaving the house safe, warm,